Did you get a little chance to read some of the book last night, Mark?
I'll tell you the truth, I didn't. You know?
Okay. Let's see.
But I will. I'm meeting some deadlines of my own. But you know, you sent me portions of it, and you sent me an outline, and
Yeah. Yes, for
so,
sure.
you know, it's not as if I'm not familiar with it, right?
Yeah. Okay, so this is, I think we're live on YouTube.
Yeah, I haven't found it yet.
We are.
Okay. So there's a little bit of lag,
Yeah, it says it's a 20-second lag.
20-second
You
lag.
have to turn it down or else it's gonna be weird.
Turn what down?
It just showed up.
I'm not seeing myself in real time. Mark, I'm seeing you in real time.
Yeah, this is live. This is real time. This is gonna be a lag. This is YouTube
Oh, okay.
Live.
All right.
YouTube live is going to be a lag, so you're gonna want to turn it down so that it doesn't throw you off.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. So then we just will go back
There's
to.
people watching. There's people watching already.
Okay, great.
Rita, Nicola.
Okay, we're here.
All
Good to
right.
see you. Good to see you, Mark.
Always
And
good to see you.
well, today is the book launch day, and this is the book. This is proof copy, author's proof. And Mark, you have been an inspiration to me to get this done because you've been cranking them out like nobody's business, and it's amazing. I think that alone is the biggest phenomenon happening in the jyotish world right now, is the pace at which you're printing books. And I'm like, I better get with this, Mark. I mean, not that I have to catch up to you, because at this point it's impossible, but to do, you know, K.N. Rao in 2000, when I spent a month in Delhi, he looked at me and said, you seem to know a lot about jyotish, but I haven't seen you work hard for the cause of jyotish. And that has, and then he said, to work hard for the cause of jyotish means that you put the cause of jyotish up here and your own interest down here. And then you're really serving the vidya.
Right.
And, you know, I just, hats off to you, Mark, because you have been serving a higher cause. I know you're not doing this just for play. This is to serve the cause, and, you know, to bring out jyotish principles that are valuable, useful for people, that have tangible, replicable results. And the other thing I want to say is, Mark, this is our 30-year anniversary now since we met. I remember it was just before the first international symposium in San Rafael. I met you at the Ananda community in Palo Alto, in my friend's apartment, Animal Dune, and I was like, wow, I like this guy.
Yeah, that was 1992, wasn't it?
That was 1990, fall of 1992. Yeah, the first international symposium where B.V. Raman was the keynote speaker.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a long time ago. A lot of water over the dam.
Yeah. And then, you know, it's at the same time when Sri Rao came the following year, we both had the chance to meet him and, you know, start
Right.
a different level. We got launched into this next, talk about launching a book. Meeting King Rao was being launched into another level of jyotish.
On Paul, I consider it one of the most important days of my life, quite frankly, because it then, you know, in many ways set the course for the rest of my life.
Yeah. 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 Same. when I met Ken, when I got a call from David Frawley, he said, there's going to be an astrologer at my house tonight, a famous astrologer from India. At that point, I was living only about 2 miles away from him in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Um, and so entering into that living room, it was a pretty small living room, a handful of people sitting around, and Ken Rao spoke past midnight. And by then, most people had filtered out. Yogi Bhajan came that night. A few other famous astrologers, Edith Hathaway was there. In any case. And at some point, he looked at me, and he had rolled up a cloth napkin. And as he was unrolling it, he said, the dashas are the unraveling of our karma through time.
Right.
And I was just struck by that. It was like being struck by lightning. And I was just like in awe because of the stature that he holds. It was like Mother Teresa saying, love God. It's like anybody can say love God, but Mother Teresa says it. And then
it made an impression.
Yes, very much, very much. And yeah. So this effort has really been, this effort with this book has been to help to serve the cause of jyotish in the area of birth time rectification. And a couple years ago, I got a call from this woman who was at the Sedona conference, a friend of mine. And she said, at every class at the Sedona conference, I'm hearing people say, how do I rectify my birth time? I mean, it could be a topic that was not even on birth time rectification, but she said in every class there was a need amongst the students to address this issue or have some methodology. And that's when I go, I'm like, people don't know how to do this. Like it's been, I learned it through osmosis by being with Ken Rao, seeing how he worked with divisional charts. And when he was in Santa Fe, he said, I asked him, so where are you going next after Santa Fe? And he said, I'm going to Houston. And I said, my dad lives in Houston. And he goes, he could pick up on my zeal. And and he said, well, why don't you come? And you can be my assistant. You can enter in birth data. And so that was the first time that I saw Ken Rao do birth time rectification. Was in the session that he gave to my own dad.
Right.
And like I was trying to think back, when this girl called me from Sedona, from the Sedona conference, I was thinking, like, when did I start having this osmosis? When I had learned, when was the seminal moment that it dawned on me how to do birth time rectification? And it was back at that time with my dad. When he started with a 10 a.m. birth time, in fact, I said to him, sir, this is before the session. I entered the birth data. Sir, he has a 10 a.m. birth time. That's all he's got. That's mother said is somewhere around 10 a.m. Is that going to be a problem? And he said, don't worry, it won't be a problem. I was like, oh no, this is embarrassing. This is his one chance to get an authentic reading with a master. And he has just, kind of around 10 a.m., as the birth time. And so he just had this calm confidence about him, like, I can handle it, don't worry. And he started with 10 a.m. and by 20 minutes into the session, he had narrowed the birth time to 9:56. And that's when I still have the cassette recording of that. And so I analyzed that. And what he did was he asked about various events in his life. Well, he didn't ask. He made statements. He said in 1948, your academic studies were doing. He said you were excelling in your academic studies and attended a prestigious school. And my dad goes, 1948, that's when I started at Stanford University. It doesn't get much more prestigious than that, right? So, I mean, he nailed it exactly. And I on my screen, so I can share that with everyone if they like to see. I mean, but this was like the seminal moment when I realized that we can use the divisional charts as a gauge for adjusting the birth time. We have a reason to change the birth time because of the divisional charts making sense. It proves that the birth time must be then because the divisional charts are that valid. All right, I've spoken too much, Mark. Everyone wants to hear you. Nobody wants to hear me.
No. I think what your story highlights is, number one, the way in which Kay and Rao approached consultations. And, you and I have talked about this. In his mind, every birth time had to prove itself, even a recorded birth time, because, even these recorded birth times, and I heard him say this, can be anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes off. And that's been my experience as well. And so he was a very, very conscientious astrologer in the sense that he never accepted that a birth time that he was given was necessarily an accurate one. It had to prove itself. And so how does a birth time prove itself? By accurately reflecting the timing of certain events, not just in the Rashi, right, but in the particular divisional chart. But then that makes it a two-way sword in the sense that if he would be the minor adjustments, as you well know, the minor adjustments that he made to your father's birth time was seeing an event, not asking about it, but actually seeing an event himself, right? Saying, and asking the person to sort of confirm that. And this would, based on the particular relevant divisional chart, tell him that that divisional chart was likely to be accurate or not. Now, of course, there's a judgment involved in that, a judgment born of a lot of experience about how events can be reflected in a divisional chart, right?
Right.
And so I love that kind of story, and I was a witness to him giving consultations as well. And let me say something about this, because people in the U.S., when they were used to getting astrological consultations, you come in and immediately the astrologer starts, making predictions or saying things about your chart, right? With him, he would then start examining the past, right, in terms of these events. And I think people were confused by that. And I even heard comments like, well, I know about my past already. I want to hear about my future.
Absolutely.
And, you'd spend a good portion of the session, and sometimes this would be upsetting to people. But what they didn't realize is that he was being very conscientious. He was ensuring that the birth chart that he was working on was not just accurate insofar as the Rashi, but also accurate insofar as the divisional charts. Therefore, when he went to predict on it, he was in a position to make a good and true prediction. So it was actually to their advantage for him to do that.
Right. It wasn't to show off. It wasn't like, see, my awesome predictor skills.
Right. Not at all. And
Yes.
I came to appreciate this myself when I saw him be doing this. But I didn't see any other astrologer, first of all, be able to do that. But number one,
indeed.
Approach it in that way. And it did make a huge impression upon me. And it had the same reaction that it had on you. Oh, I can use the timing of life events, examining them in the light of both the Rashi and the divisional chart to verify whether the birth time is giving correct results, or whether I need to understand that the birth time needs some correction, even minor correction. Yes. We were talking about the other day when I was observing him giving a consultation. He did what you were talking about. He asked some questions about marriage. He asked some questions about childbirth, right? And then he said, your Navamsha is correct, but your Saptamsha needs some correction, right? And so again, this really, by osmosis was your term. This clued me into the fact that, this is how one can rectify. Now, it is an advanced skill, right? Again, it requires a good knowledge of the divisional charts and how events can show up in the divisional charts, but it's also an essential skill. And this is where I want to say, Von Paul, I'm really excited about the fact that you wrote this book. Because, and I could be wrong about this, but to my knowledge, there's really no book dedicated solely to this topic that explains and goes into detail about this methodology, right?
With
And I wanna
examples,
emphasize-
with
I wanna-
examples.
With examples. And I want to
right.
emphasize the word methodology, step by step, in
Yes.
detail. And I
Yes.
think this is where you've done a really good service, serving Jyotish's higher cause here, because it's such a critical topic. You and I have talked about this. The biggest problem in the world of astrology is birth times.
Yes.
And I remember Ken Rao saying, give me an accurate birth time, I'll predict brilliantly. He was not modest that way. But then he would also say, give me an incorrect set of divisional charts and I'll fail miserably.
Yeah.
And that just highlights the critical importance of an accurate enough birth time to get an accurate set of divisional charts, for then you can employ the whole sophistication of jyotish.
Yes.
Otherwise, trying to predict just on the basis of the Raji, as I heard Ken Rao say, is a rather crude affair.
Mhm.
Right? And so this is why, and I emphasize the idea of an objective methodology, because you hear people say, like, say a birth time gives a degree of the lagna between two signs. Okay, so you have to immediately sort of stop and determine which is the correct ascendant. And I've heard people say, like, well, they seem much more like a Scorpio ascendant to me. Right? This kind of very sort of objective, subjective sort of evaluation. Very
Yes.
subjective evaluation, which you can't go by and shouldn't go by at all, right? And
Well, not as
so,
a primary method. I mean, it would. I remember I went one time when I was in Delhi at Ken Rao's house. There was some Ken Rao and a few of his teachers were talking about a particular student's chart, and and someone said, well, he's very much. He made a comment just about what you're saying about a subjective personality trait, and he said, nothing doing. No. Don't. The personalities shouldn't be the primary topic. I mean, it could,
right.
and
Not-
or the
not at
primary
all.
method. Yes.
Not at all. And nor should just one or two events.
Yes. Well said.
You do the same thing. When I go about do this, I send that questionnaire out to people that has a whole list of events that I'm asking them to give input about if they happened in their life. Birth of younger siblings, major relocations, purchase of property, of course, marriage and childbirth, and so all these different kinds of events, because you have to build sort of a body of evidence. Because as you well know, when you go to do this, you sometimes say you're trying to decide between two ascendants. Sometimes you can make the case, right, with certain events and the timing. You can make the case for both of them, right?
Absolutely.
So it becomes, very challenging that way. But if you have a whole body of your whole list of events and you start looking at those, what typically emerges is that one ascendant versus the other really starts to clearly indicate the whole body of the events better, right?
Yes.
And so, this is why.
But that's a comprehensive process, right? And it's not just. I mean, like you said, it can't just be one or two events. It can't just be, it's good. If you get it right in the Navamsha, that's enough. I mean, if we're adjusting the birth time while a session is happening and someone doesn't want a comprehensive process, but if they're paying, then we could settle on the correct birth time based on one divisional chart or one event. But really, to have certainty, we need to see across many divisional charts and many events. Then we have, if it fits in the natal chart, then it fits in the D4 chart, it fits in the D7 chart, then D9, D10, D24, and D60, then you've got something, you've got a great deal of certainty. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to prove it across 7 divisional charts.
And that's the process, right? That's the methodology. Yes. And, you know, again, I talked about it being an advanced skill. It's time consuming, right? And this is why I think we talked about this, a lot of astrologers would prefer to avoid it, right? But at the same time, it's, again, if you're going to be practicing in a conscientious way, the birth time should prove itself. And this is what it comes down to, right?
I think for me, what became like a birth time rectification became like a love affair. I'll just say it. Just like I love to do it. This is not something I'm trying to avoid.
Paul. You are the exception.
Well, I don't get it, because for me, it's just like, in the first chapter, I talk about, it's like the best analogy I could think of is like getting the keys to the laboratory as a graduate level student, and then going into the laboratory and seeing that high powered microscope in the corner and having the nerve to peer through it. That's like working with the divisional chart with birth time rectification.
It can be a very interesting intellectual exercise, right?
Yes.
And I recommend people sort of approach it like that. It's like solving a puzzle.
Yes. And then when you see all of the divisional charts lining up, not just one, like not just, it's that birth time is perfect for childbirth, but is it perfect for marriage? Is it perfect for getting that prestigious job? Is it, on and on? Does it make sense when they started their PhD program? Are we seeing that in the D24? That's when it gets exciting. It's like it all lines up, and then it's like, well, it's like the analogy you say in the foreword of the book, and that it's like getting the Rubik's cube perfect. Right. I love that. Yeah, it's like it all lines up and it's thrilling. All of a sudden it's thrilling because you did it.
And like working with a Rubik's cube can also be very frustrating.
Oh, yes.
And exasperating. But yes, when it clicks and everything falls into place, then it is a kind of a intellectually thrilling moment, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is why a book like this really does, serve serious students of jyotish, because this is to do this sort of thing is not for the beginner typically. Right? Yes. I mean, the beginner can get started with working on it, but it's again more of an advanced skill what I talk about. But one, I think any serious student of jyotish, certainly a practitioner, certainly a teacher, needs to develop some mastery of. And I think you've provided the blueprint, and I really applaud you for that.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I thank you so much for writing the foreword and being a constant support, in this journey of writing this book. Like Mark, how do I do this?
Well, you can thank your own dashas too, Ron Paul, right? Because obviously you were running a good period for doing something like this. And, I'm not going to reveal any things about your chart that you don't want to be revealed, but, I think Saturn, a strong Saturn, which rules Kal, right? Kal, time, is someone that you need to thank Shani for this as well, right? Because I think your inclination to do something like this very much has to do with the positive energy of that graha, right?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, having planets in Virgo also, for talking about precision. I talk a lot about precision in the book. Right. Use that as a key word, but Virgo, moon in Virgo is what I have. So, and I know you're ascendant Virgo, so that's our connection.
Shani in the ascendant, I can be excruciatingly detail oriented.
Yes. Well,
so why don't you tell folks a little bit about the book? I think people would be interested in hearing about the book, just in terms of, kind of the different chapters and what they cover and that sort of thing.
Oh, would you like me to do that right now? Oh, sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well,
Just an overview. Just an overview.
Yeah. Well, I start with my own experiences with birth time rectification and how it has, of all, Kay and Ralph focuses on or encourages students to practice jyotish as a sadhana, spiritual practice. Practicing birth time rectification, that's why I love it, is that it's meditative. You use your intuition, but you're also using your intellect, your analysis. So it's a blend between art and, yes, a blend of art and science. So I talk about that in the first chapter. So I talk about this being in harmony. The birth time should reflect a mathematical harmony in our lives. It's a sacred moment. So the first chapter is just an intro, you could say, but then I go into the problem. The problem is the birth time. It's a prevalent problem that people don't seem to want to talk about. It's the elephant in the jyotish living room, I say. It's like, let's not touch on that topic because then I have to work hard and try to find the birth time. Let's just go with 10 a.m. That's what you gave me. That's what I'm using. Even if it's right on the cusp of the ascendant, say at 29 degrees Capricorn or something.
Right.
So I talk about the birth time problem from the perspective of jyotish as the only being one of the 6 systems in our jyotish, as we call it, or Vedic astrology, is just one of the 6 systems in jyotish, the all-encompassing system of jyotish. And so it's just Jataka, it's birth astrology, natal astrology, that
versus things like Prashna or Muhurta, things like that.
Exactly. Right. And so with Jataka, we have a distinct disadvantage because we're dependent on that birth time.
Right.
It better be right. Like people come wanting a spot on accurate reading, but they come with a rounded birth time, 12 noon, and they expect precision. And that's to be expected. It is a classical system. Precision is expected of a classical system. I talk about this birth time problem, and then I talk about the solution, which is the divisional charts. That is the doorway to precision through the divisional charts. Why? Because they are a microscopic look at the macroscopic natal chart. So if we want to go into deeper detail, then we use the divisional charts. So I talk about how the divisional charts can be used as a tool. It's a tool, a gauge for adjusting the birth time, using the tidal bar with the range of the ascendant in that divisional chart. So using our jyotish software to our advantage to be able to adjust the birth time, having the tidal bar showing the timing of the ascendants in all the divisional charts. And getting back to that moment with Kay and Rao and my dad's chart, he had all the divisional charts on the screen with the tidal bars above. And that's what he was working from. So this is what I'm showing in the second chapter, or the second chapter on the birth time problem. The third chapter is the divisional chart solution. The second chapter is birth time problem. And then the fourth chapter is on the framework of precision. So how do we put it all together into a well-oiled machine, make this thing work? And I talk about the cone method, what I call the cone method, which starts with the wide ascendant in the natal chart and ends with the point of the cone, which is in the divisional charts. That's the Shastyamsha, the D60 chart. So
Right.
if you get the natal chart right and the Shastyamshas right, and the main divisional charts in between, you can bet you're on. You got it. You know, you can at least validate. You have reasons that can prove that can prove the correct birth time.
Right.
Yeah, the correct ascendance. Just like that quote you mentioned about give me an accurate set of divisional charts, then I will predict brilliant. I can predict brilliantly. Otherwise, we'll go wrong.
Right. And, you know, just to clarify this cone thing you mentioned, you know, obviously a cone starts at one end, it's very wide and then narrows down. That what Van Paul's referring to is that you got the Rashi, but then say a divisional chart like D3, which is, you know, 10 degrees, right? And then you go down to D4, which is 7.5 degrees increment, and so on and so forth, where you get down to the, you know, Shasti Amshas, which is the finest division. And so you're going from the broader perspective to the more and more minute perspective. And let me say something about that, you know, that I'm sure you highlight in your book. Many people have educational achievements in the sense that they have degrees. They could be undergraduate degrees, they could be advanced degrees, master's degrees, PhD degrees. And there's a particular divisional chart, D24, as everyone should be aware, that is specific to this. And it's a rather fine division, right? You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think every 5 minutes the degree
Yes.
of the
Yeah, I
logna-
mean, it's right there in the division. It's dividing 120 minutes, which is the general length of the natal chart by
Right.
24. So 24, 120 divided by 24 is 5. So yes, 5 minutes for each ascendant.
So this is when I go to short, maybe shouldn't say this, but when I want to short circuit this process,
Right. You want a shortcut. You want a shortcut.
I sometimes immediately sort of look at the timing of these educational achievement moments in the D24 to see if I feel the D24 is giving correct results.
Yes.
And I just had an experience of this sort of the other day where a student of mine was asking me, well, you know, are my divisional charts correct? And I knew that they'd had a law degree and even had a PhD in law. And so I said, let's look at those dates. Let's look at the D24, see if what we're seeing there seems to check out. And I won't go into details now because I'm not showing this visually, but it did. Now that's just one event, right? And that's just one divisional chart. But immediately I felt like I got some good confirmation that the birth time's accurate within 5 minutes, right? And then we started looking at marriage dates, then we started looking at childbirth dates, and then we started looking at career milestones, when she got her first job, when she got another, and so forth. And in each case, every divisional chart was checking out with maybe some question about the Navamsha, which was right on the borderline, right? And this took me, you know, maybe 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it left her feeling confident. And the birth time was from a written record. I think it was like 11:43. It seemed rather precise. Okay?
Right.
But I was proving that it was giving the correct results. It then creates confidence in her that she's looking at a correct chart, and confidence in me if I'm going to predict on that chart. Just as an example. Right?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to take long. Like, boy, I mean, going straight to the D24, somebody has a prestigious, illustrious academic career, it should definitely be shown in the D24. I love the D24. I'm like,
now you don't always have that luxury because you don't always have a person who's got that kind of background, right?
Sure, and that also should be reflected in the D24 then. But it's not harder. What's that? And with the Rashi. Yeah, exactly. Now that we're talking about the D24, should we just jump to my dad's chart? And I'll show you that.
I think people should find that interesting.
Yeah, so let's do that. So this, okay, hold on. Let's get this going and we'll use this.
I would find it interesting.
Right. Okay, so he started at Stanford September 6, 1948. Let's see. Start at Stanford. Okay, so we're going to change this to the D24. Chaturvimshamsha, or also called the Siddhamsha. Change this to Chaturvimshamsha. All right, so then now we have his natal chart in the upper left-hand corner, using the South Indian and the North Indian. And then we have in the lower left-hand corner, the Chaturvimshamsha, South Indian and North Indian. So we can see that his ascendant in the D24 is Aries.
Right.
Okay, so counting 5 from Aries, we get Leo. This box is Leo, and we have the sun aspecting to Leo from Aquarius. We have the moon in Leo. So they're mutual aspects, sun and moon. So sun and moon are consecutive dashas, right?
And what you're showing is that they're well placed.
Yes, but the sun and moon is sun is a 6-year dasha, moon is a 10-year dasha. So 16 years he had of the sun and moon dasha, and this began in 1948. So let me see. This is okay. Hold on. So okay, this he started. When he started Stanford, it was in the Sun Mars Dasha. So he started them. This is the event, Sun. So he started the 6-year Sun Dasha in 1948, and it went till 1954. Sun rules the prestigious sign of Leo. So that's where you get prestigious. He said to my dad, "You went to a prestigious school." This is where he saw it. D24, it's confirming it. In the natal chart, can you see sun involved in the 5th house, 5th lord, or aspected by Jupiter or Mercury? No, it's in the 12th house. Very difficult to explain that event. But in the D24, you can see it. Okay.
Right, and I think, maybe for some beginners watching this, generally speaking, and this is again very generally speaking because there can be exceptions, when planets fall in angles, triangles, or 2 and 11, right, they're generally speaking going to give better results relative to the meaning of that division versus places like dishdanas or trick houses, right? And so, the fact that the sun here is ruling the 5th, also aspecting back onto its own 5th house, would, again, relative to this division, show the sun giving good results as it pertains to like academic achievement, right?
Yes, exactly.
Whereas that would not be obvious at all in the Rashi, with exception of maybe from Dasha Lagna, but, again, it would not be real apparent from the sun's position and condition in the Rashi.
The Dasha Lagna or Chandra Lagna, Surya Lagna, all reading the chart from, which would all be the same. So early on in the session with my dad, he asked this question, or he made the statement. It wasn't even a question. He didn't ask to verify. He said, "You went to a prestigious school at that time." This was at the early onset of his sun dasha. And then he said, in 1952, you continued your academic career. And he said, what did you tell me? He said, "What did you do?" He said, my dad said, "In the fall of 1952, I started my PhD at Syracuse University." So this was still, if we looked at this is still in the sun dasha. And then while he was doing his PhD, it advanced to the moon dasha. So sun and moon represented his undergraduate and postgraduate studies, clearly shown here in the D24. So this is why I fall in love with the D24. Look at this. Look at how beautifully this explains it. But if you look at the title bar, look how specific this is. This is the about 5-minute window that we have, 9:55 and 8 seconds to 10:01. So it confirmed that he was born between that 5-minute time range of 9:56 and 10:01. 5
And
minutes.
so he saw no reason to adjust this particular.
Exactly. Exactly. And then he, however, he did ask about getting a job. So let's see about that event. And this, he did adjust the birth time. So let me go to here and let's grab this event, which is getting a job at Drake University. Okay, so there we got it.
So your father was an academic?
Oh, yes. Yes, he was a professor of social sciences, geography at Drake University. Okay, so then he got the job at Drake University in the Moon Jupiter Dasha. So if we look at the D10, if we look at the D10 chart, let's just start with the actual birth time that Kan Ra was working from, which was 10 a.m. So with 10 a.m., it's giving Aquarius ascendant. Moon
He
is in
adjusted
the,
it to Capricorn because he got a job in the moon period.
exactly, right. Exactly, Mark. You just made quick work of this situation. That's exactly right. So we go back 2 minutes. He went back to, he changed it to 2 minutes earlier because the timing for the Dashamsha was 9:43 to 9:58. So taking it back 2 minutes to 9:58 changes the ascendant in the D10 to Capricorn.
And let me say something about that, because I make this point all the time, that planets, when they fall in the lagna of a particular divisional chart, have a
Yes,
special ability to bring events related to that particular division. So
Yes.
in other words, when you have a planet in the lagna of D10 and then you run that major period, that's can be a very good period in terms of one's obtaining position and even rise. Of course, that will be even more so if the condition of the planet is good and falling in good, making good yogas, and the Lagna Lord of the division is strong and well placed. So there's more to consider. But generally speaking, this is why I immediately said he probably backed it up to Capricorn, because this is what would have put the moon in the ascendant, right?
exactly. And then the Jupiter was the subdasha. Jupiter was the subdasha. And later that year, it changed. Okay, wait.
To
Any
moon
case,
Saturn would have gone to moon
second.
Saturn.
So at 9:58, in any case, it was Moon Jupiter for a few months, and that was exact in 1958, and those few months were when he got the job. Then
Can I
he
say
moved.
something additionally here?
Yes.
Let me say something additionally about this timing. So it was a big revelation to me when I discovered that all the different Graha yogas that are given in the ancient texts can and should be applied to divisional charts. And I was gratified when I
Yes.
came across the work of Shishadri Iyer, who also
Yes.
echoed this idea. So if you think about some lunar yoga that the moon is involved in there, what you would see is a very good Shubha Anatha yoga, right? Where you've got two benefics, one in strength, behind the moon in this particular divisional chart. So actually when he runs Moon Jupiter, he activates basically a good lunar yoga, and it was in this period and sub-period that he obtains the position.
Exactly. And Jupiter, notice how Jupiter is with Venus. Venus is the 10th Lord from the ascendant.
Yoga Karaka, Venus, but
Yes.
it's the two best benefics falling behind the moon, giving this Shubha So Anafa Yoga Meshubha means, of course, benefics
Yes.
on the one side of the moon. It's not a benefic hemming. There are benefics on both sides, right? Which would maybe even be better. But this is a good combination as it pertains to D10, and this is what you'll see all the time. When activated in the dasha sequence, you see the result.
Yeah, so he landed the job. This was his break into academic world, getting this prestigious professor position, and then later that year, in June of that year, he moved. So this is also very interesting because he moved in the Moon Saturn period. He got the job, had the contract signed prior to that. Then he moved in Moon Saturn, and you can see in the D10 chart, Saturn is in the 4th house, the house of moving. It's also in the 4th house, aspected by Jupiter in the natal chart.
Paul, let me clarify. When you say he moved, you mean he moved to a different position, or he actually physically relocated?
No. He was living in New York. He went to Syracuse University in New York. Then he got the job at Drake University, which is in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where I was born. Yes,
gotcha.
That's where he.
No,
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be seeing something like that reflected in D4?
Yes, you would. That's a great point. Yes, but this is a microscopic look at career, correct?
Right.
So it's going to show.
No, I get your point. I get your point.
Yes. So it does show it here, but also if we look at the D4 chart, it's a very interesting phenomenon that happens. And that is that we have Saturn in the 10th house.
Mm-hmm.
So, and aspecting the 4th house and aspecting 4th lord. So the D4 chart shows a move related to career. The D10 chart shows a job that involves also a move. So K.N. Rao says, I see you verbatim. He said something like, I see you moving and getting a very good job, either as a professor or as a teacher. And then he asked, what happened? And my dad said, that's when I got my job at Drake University. So, I mean, K.N. Rao has this amazing ability to do retrospective predictions. He said that, but he had the divisional charts on the screen. He could make this statement because he could see how that minute change in the birth time would make this actually make sense, logical sense.
It should be said that he had a special ability this way that had to do with his profound knowledge of astrology, but I think it also should be said it had to do with his tremendously developed intuitive powers born of his spiritual practice.
Beautiful.
And that gave him, the combination gave him that special ability that I've really never seen to that degree in any other jyotishi I've ever encountered.
Yes. Yeah,
but
it's uncanny.
It's a great example for people to see, Von Paul. So,
shall we look at one more event?
Up to you.
Okay, sure. Let's look at it. Let's look at marriage. This is quite interesting too. Since in the book I give the verbatim quotes of what he said in the reading, that I felt like I was on the front row seats witnessing Sherlock Holmes for the first time as Dr. Watson. Like he was discovering when my dad was born in 20 seconds.
Through logical
20
deduction.
minutes, excuse me, 20 minutes. He got it done in 20 minutes. And it's taken me 20 years to figure out what he did. But that's what my book about. It shows what he actually did. And this is, let's look at his event of marriage, an important event in my life, right? I wouldn't be here without it.
Right.
So let's see. Navamsha chart. So this is when in the reading he asked for the exact date. He said in 1956, I see you falling in love with someone and getting married. My dad said, and then he said, when did you get married? He said, okay, it was September of 1956. The next, no, 50s, yeah, 56. In any case, he said 1955 you fell in love, and my dad said it was in September of 1956 I got married. So then this was the moon Rahu period. Okay. So
Major period of the moon, sub period of Rahu.
exactly. Moon, yes. Mahadasha moon, Antardasha Rahu. And this is what he was looking at. This is the this is a Navamsha chart with 958, because he had already adjusted the birth time 2 minutes to 958. So this is what he was looking at. So if you notice what happens, oh, first of all, this is the time range, 9:57 and 16 seconds to 10:14. That is the Virgo ascendant in the Navamsha chart. Okay, so the master at work, he changes the birth time 2 minutes earlier, or just 1 minute earlier. It gets the Leo ascendant. And just let's take a look at just how brilliant this is. All of a sudden, then we have the moon in the ascendant, right? Moon in the ascendant, as Marc, you just explained very well, of why it's important in the divisional chart. It's a key factor that can give you confidence that that is actually a possible event to happen. Getting married in the moon dasha, if moon is in the ascendant, it's a more of a likelihood, right? Okay, so then changing the ascendant from Virgo to Leo, Rahu then is sitting in the ninth house and aspected by Gesu, Saturn, the seventh lord. So now we can already make sense of moon being in the ascendant. That is a strong clue. But now we have an aspect on the Antardasha lord, the subdasha lord, Rahu, by the seventh lord. Then we have two strong clues for moon Rahu being the time for likely time for marriage. It's more likely than if you left it at Virgo ascendant. Then what do you got? How can you logically explain this? Rahu's no longer aspected by the seventh lord, Saturn, or any seventh lord. It's in the eighth house, not an auspicious house.
And moon goes to the 12th, not connected to the 1-7 axis in the way.
Bingo. Yeah. So then they're both in Dushtana, the Mahadasha, Antardasha are both in Dushtana houses, which is not a recipe for marriage. In this case, it's you'd be scratching your head trying to figure out why this would give the event of marriage. But taking the time back 1 minute, then all of a sudden, both moon's in the ascendant, it aspects the seventh house. That is a strong confirmation. Rahu being aspected by seventh lord, again, strong confirmation. So at this point, I see him change the birth time from 9:58 to 9:56, which was the final time that he left it at.
And, I can just add here, why this is really important to be seeing this timing of marriage in Navamsha is because, again, moon Rahu giving this result in the birth chart is, again, not obvious at all as to why that period and sub-period.
Yes.
And this is what we mean why the importance of the divisional charts. Very often, you'll be scratching your head as to why a certain period and sub-period could give an event if you're just looking at the Rashi.
Yes.
Where
one of the paragraph headings that I have is the natal chart is not enough. And okay, let's see. K.N. Rao's book, the planets and children, that he brought with him in 1993 when he taught at the Second International Symposium. In there, he shows how, he makes a dramatic statement. First of all, he says that, I should get the exact quote. Let's see if I have the book. Anyways, the exact quote
why
is.
don't you just paraphrase, Paul?
Paraphrase. Okay. He says that it's disastrous and ludicrous to not use the the Saptamsa for timing for childbirth, for timing childbirth.
Right.
It's
One
disastrous
follow-up.
for a predictive astrologer to not be able to get an accurate prediction, right? So
Before we go on, can I come back to the timing of the marriage? With this adjustment to the birth time, would it have taken place on the sub period level, moon, Rahu moon?
yes, I believe so. Yes. As far as I know, yes. I mean, I could look at a different screen
Well,
and get it
I'm
for
looking,
sure.
I'm
But
looking at it here, and that would appear to be the case, but
yes,
I'm just
yes,
wanting to confirm that.
yes,
Which
Yeah.
would again support the idea of the moon being along the 1/7 axis of the Navamsha, in this case, in the Lagna of Navamsha.
yes,
So I
Yes.
think this clearly sort of illustrates your process, which is laid out in detail with many, many examples in the book.
yes, yes, and explain much better than I can write better than I can talk. Mark,
No.
you're a master of both.
I don't know about that, but you're explaining it fine. The book is well written, I will say that. You know, I was privileged to see some advanced chapters, and I think Von Paul has a good way of using different analogies to bring home a point, as you've heard about already here in this presentation. I love the analogy of the student sneaking into the lab and using the high-powered microscope.
Well, that's what it feels like. You're in there alone, and it's quiet. Well, you take in your own free time, you go into the laboratory where it's quiet, and you take a look at the divisional chart, and then you go, oh my God, there it is. There it is. It's just like what the professor said it would be. It's exactly like that. And you, those of you who are watching, as you see these, as you work with these methods, you will go into your own charts or your charts of friends, families, clients, and see, oh my God, there's a divisional chart working brilliantly to validate a birth time. And that then gives you confidence as an astrologer that I'm on the right track. And when you're seeing it across an array of divisional charts, then you know, wow, I'm not just on the right track. This is it. This is it. This is the birth time. I can give it to you with confidence. And that's what an astrologer wants. You want to give the birth time to a person. That's the deliverable. I want to deliver an accurate set of divisional charts, which can only happen if the birth time is correct.
So why don't you say a little bit about this special offer you're having here as a part of the book launch?
Yes, so we're in the middle of the book launch. It just started today. And we had a little glitch, a little lag with Amazon. But if you are interested in getting a copy of the book, it will be available during this book launch. Just keep going to Amazon and you'll find it. It will be at $0. It will be free if you do a digital download through Kindle. It's at it should be at $2.99 right now. And by the end of the day today, it will be at $0. So we've been working within the limitations of that Amazon has. It's a little bit glitchy and laggy.
First, I think this is an incredible offer to be able to get this, I think, very valuable resource at no cost, you know, during this period. So I think it's pretty generous of Von Paul to offer this.
Yeah, grab it while you can. It will be like $12.99 or something about that afterwards. The hard copy also will be available anytime. They say between 24 and 72 hours. So 24 hours was about 24 hours ago. So anytime it could be available for purchase as well.
So do you think we've had the conversation that we want to have?
Yeah, let's see. Stop sharing the screen. Just a second. Let me just, let's see. Okay. We'll get back to this screen. Yeah, so So we've shown some examples, and we've also talked about some great concepts. And now you have a chance to go through it yourself, getting this book. And I think you'll find it fun to read and interesting and also very informative.
I would agree. Recommend it to everybody.
So thanks so much for joining us, and there'll be more at some point. And thank you, Mark. Thanks so much for writing the foreword. Thanks for being a constant friend and colleague and all these years. And
you're welcome, and congratulations on the book.
thank you, Mark. And thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time.